This podcast is a work of historical interpretation. While we strive for accuracy, some aspects of history are open to interpretation and debate. Thank you for listening. Are we recording?
Yeah, it's been recording.
Good. Stop making noises.
I'm eating my sponge candy. Are you mad because I got the bigger bag for me? Or the bigger pieces for me?
No. No.
Stefanelli's versus Polacco's?
It's the snow. Oh, now I'm a little mad.
See? Is that Stefanelli's or Romolo? I don't know.
Stefanelli's. I'm thankful that it hasn't started snowing yet.
Yes, it has.
No, it has not. I haven't seen it. It has not existed. And that is the final word on that. Welcome to Time Tellers, where we dive into history's most defining moments. Today, we're revisiting one of history's most famous legal battles, the Scopes Monkey Trial of 1925. It was a trial about much more than law or science. It was about the freedom of thought, religion, and the future of education in America. We'll explore the events leading up to the trial, the key figures involved, its impact on law and society, and how it has been remembered in the culture.
Yay.
Particularly through the play, Inherit the Wind. On a side note, this topic is near to my heart as I had the honor of portraying Mrs. Krebs on the Erie Playhouse stage in the production of Inherit the Wind in March of this year.
Did you ever look up to see who that actually was? I remember you going to.
I tried to, and I don't think she was based on any real person. She was just a character to represent part of the town, along with a few of the other characters that were in the play. Not a main character. I had, I think, 10 lines. And yes, I got to crochet on stage. And while doing that, I made my sister a shawl. The story begins in Dayton, Tennessee, a small town that became the epicenter of a national debate about evolution and creationism. And I honestly don't think I knew that there was a Dayton, Tennessee until I was doing this play. Because to me, it's always Dayton, Ohio. Okay, first let's talk about the Butler Act. In March of 1925, Tennessee passed the Butler Act, which was a controversial law that prohibited the teaching of any theory that denied the biblical account of human creation. The act specifically targeted Charles Darwin's theory of evolution and sparked a heated national debate. It remained in effect until 1967. The law reflected a broader cultural clash in America between modernists, who embraced science and change, and fundamentalists who wanted to uphold traditional Christian values. This clash not only shaped the trial, but also had far-reaching implications for society and its values. So, we gotta talk about the ACLU. The American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, saw an opportunity to challenge the law, calling for a test case to argue for academic freedom. And this is what I think a lot of people don't know about this. Anybody who does know anything about the Scopes trial probably doesn't realize this part. But local leaders in Dayton, seeking to put their town on the map, recruited John T. Scopes, a high school science teacher and football coach, to serve as the defendant. Scopes agreed despite being unsure if he had even ever taught evolution. While not a passionate advocate for evolution, Scopes believed in academic freedom and saw the trial as an opportunity to challenge the restrictive law. The trial, officially called the State of Tennessee versus John Thomas Scopes, was not just a legal battle, but a national spectacle, covered by hundreds of journalists and broadcast on the radio. The drama and tension in the courtroom was palpable, making it a riveting event for all who followed it. The Scopes Monkey Trial was not just a local affair, it was a national event. Some of these major newspapers were the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, Baltimore Sun, Atlanta Journal, Nashville Banner, Christian Science Monitor, and Cincinnati Enquirer. These newspapers would provide daily updates. They would emphasize the trial's implications for science, education, and the clash between modernism and fundamentalism. This extensive media coverage ensured that the trial's significance was widely understood, at least for that time period. I do wonder how many people nowadays would even remember this.
Oh, you're talking about... Are you talking about inheriting the wind?
Yes!
Inherit the wind, whatever.
What do you remember from Inherit the Wind?
I remember how terrified I was during the one scene where Matthew Harrison Brady dies, and that one girl screams, because that screams terrified me.
My middle child here was the stage crew for Inherit the Wind. She got to see Mama on stage, and...
I'm sorry.
And I think you enjoyed it. So, but that is what we are talking about today. Okay. It featured two of the most famous lawyers of the era. First one being William Jennings Bryan, who was the prosecutor. He was also a 3-time Democratic presidential candidate, a devout Christian, and a leading voice of the fundamentalist movement. In 1860... Wow, that's not the right year. In 1896 and 1900, he lost to William McKinley, whose campaigns emphasized a substantial gold standard, economic growth, and success in the Spanish-American War. In 1908, Bryan faced William Howard Taft, losing again as Taft benefited from the support of popular outgoing President Theodore Roosevelt. Bryan took on this case as a moral crusade, seeing the trial as a chance to defend the biblical account of creation and protect the nation's youth from what he saw as Darwinism's dangerous effects. And that his name was Matthew Harrison Brady, I think, in the play, if I remember correctly. Our second lawyer is Clarence Darrow, the defense attorney. Clarence Darrow was a famous criminal defense attorney known for defending controversial clients. He represented labor leaders, anarchists, and others fighting for civil liberties. Probably one of the most famous would be in 1924 when he defended Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, two wealthy Chicago teenagers who kidnapped and murdered 14-year-old Bobby Franks in a case known as the Leopold and Loeb trial. The pair murdered in a supposed intellectual exercise, believing they could carry out the perfect crime. Darrow's defense aimed to save the young men from the death penalty, emphasizing their youth, psychological issues, and the influence of Nietzschean philosophy on their motives.
What about Nietzsche?
Well, it's Nietzschean. I can't pronounce that. That's great.
Oh.
In a famous 12-hour closing argument, Darrow appealed to the judge's sense of empathy. Darrow took on Scope's defense to challenge the Butler Act and promote scientific inquiry and freedom of thought. During the trial, the courtroom became a battleground for science versus religion, with Bryan arguing that evolution undermined moral values and Darrow defending the right to teach scientific theories. The highlight of the trial came when Darrow called Bryan himself to the stand as an expert witness on the Bible. In a dramatic cross-examination, Darrow pressed Bryan to admit that some of the parts of the Bible may be open to interpretation, challenging his literalist views. In a notable exchange, Darrow questioned Bryan about the literal truth of the Book of Jonah. Okay, so I'm just going to read 3 lines here. First is Clarence Darrow. Do you believe that Jonah was swallowed by a whale? William Jennings Bryan. I do. Darrow. Literally? Bryan. Yes, I believe it literally. Following the exchange about Jonah, Clarence Darrow continued to challenge William Jennings Bryan on his literal interpretation of the Bible. Darrow asked whether Bryan believed in the literal truth of other biblical stories, such as the world's creation in 6 days and the existence of Adam and Eve. Bryan affirmed his belief in these accounts, emphasizing his commitment to the Bible's literal interpretation. This line of questioning aimed to underscore the tensions between scientific understanding and religious beliefs, which were central to the Scope's trial. And that is the scene that's in Inherit the Wind, with obviously some artistic license. Due to the intense interest, some parts of the trial were held outside on the courthouse lawn to accommodate the crowd. The Scopes monkey trial lasted 8 days from July 10th to July 21st, 1925. The verdict. The jury deliberated only 9 minutes. 9 whole minutes.
Wow.
What do you think? Do they find him guilty or innocent?
Guilty.
Yep. Finding Scopes unanimously guilty and fined him $100, which is worth approximately $1,695 when adjusted for inflation. While the trial didn't resolve the debate over evolution, it symbolized the ongoing conflict between science and religion in American society. And I'm pretty sure they knew the outcome, and this was meant for appeals to go up the chain to the state Supreme Court eventually, being the goal. So some short-term legal outcomes. The Butler Act, the law that sparked the trial, remained in place, like I said earlier, until 1967. However, the Scopes trial brought significant national attention to the issues of academic freedom, paving the way for future legal battles and changes in education law. Modernists, scientists, educators, and urban intellectuals largely backed academic freedom, asserting that teachers should be allowed to teach scientific theories, such as evolution, in schools. In 1927, the Tennessee Supreme Court upheld the Butler Act, but overturned Scopes' conviction on a technicality, stating that a jury, not a judge, should have set the fine. So the jury found him guilty and the judge set the fine. As a result, the conviction was dismissed and the fine was never enforced. The trial sparked debates about what should be taught in schools, leading to a gradual change in curricula. By the 1950s and 60s, as science education expanded, evolution was reintroduced into public schools. It also exposed deep cultural divisions, symbolizing the broader struggle between modernism and traditionalism in America, especially, I'm sure, during the 1960s when there was a lot of change going on in this country.
What was going on in the 50s and 60s, especially the 60s?
I don't know, civil rights? Vietnam War? Also, the trial set the stage for future court battles over the separation of church and state, particularly in education. One case is Epperson versus Arkansas in 1968. The court ruled in favor of Epperson, stating that the law intended to establish religious views in public schools, which violated the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. This decision reinforced that public education must be secular and based on scientific inquiry, ensuring that laws cannot promote specific religious doctrines. We're talking public schools here, not private, obviously.
People would believe that.
And that was 1968 what state were we just in? Oh, I didn't name a state. Okay. I saw the word stating and got confused. Oh, it's Friday, guys. It's been a long week. Edwards versus Aguillard in 1987 also later ruled against laws banning the teaching of evolution, again citing the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. These rulings reinforced the principle that public education should remain free from religious mandates, affirming the right to teach scientific theories in school. So the Establishment Clause is a clause in the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. It prohibits the government from establishing a religion. The precise definition of establishment is unclear. Historically, it means prohibiting state-sponsored churches. The Establishment Clause is a limitation placed upon the United States Congress, preventing it from passing legislation establishing an official religion for the United States. It's sometimes referred to as the separation of church and state. The rulings collectively emphasize that scientific theories like evolution must be taught based on scientific merit rather than be suppressed by religious objections. Beyond the specific issue of evolution, these cases set an important precedent for how the courts interpreted the First Amendment concerning public schools, impacting debates over topics like sex education, climate, science, and other subjects that can intersect with religious beliefs. So, again, John T. Scopes was a young science teacher and football coach who reluctantly agreed to be the defendant on trial. He was not a committed advocate for the abolition, but again saw the trial as an opportunity for civil rights and scientific freedom. After the trial, he moved to Chicago to work as an oil engineer and avoided the public spotlight. I do believe he never married and never had kids. I remember correctly when I was looking him up. And I believe he died pretty young, because he was a smoker, and I think he died from, but I could be wrong about that. So
Smoking's bad for you.
Williams Jennings Bryan was the prominent orator, politician, and leader of the fundamentalist movement. He viewed the trial as a moral mission to protect Christian values, and he died just 5 days after the trial ended. Many believe exhausted by the courtroom battles. In Inherit the Wind, he dies on stage, which is what my daughter was talking about earlier. Darrow was one of America's most famous defense attorneys again. His performance in the Scope trial solidified his reputation as a champion of civil liberties. He continued advocating for civil rights and opposition to the death penalty until he died in 1938. And him and Bryan were friendly. And in fact, Darrow was a part of at least one of his presidential campaigns. H.L. Mencken was a journalist and a satirist for the Baltimore Sun. And he covered the trial extensively. He portrayed it as a battle of wits and mocked the town's fundamentalism. His reporting helped shape the public perception of the trial as a clash between enlightenment and ignorance. And the Scopes trial was fictionalized into the play Inherit the Wind, written by Jerome Lawrence and Robert E. Lee in 1955. The play is not meant to be a factual retelling, but a parable about the dangers of suppressing ideas and the importance of intellectual freedom. It was written as a response to McCarthyism, using the trial as an allegory for the Red Scare. McCarthyism was a period in the late 1940s and 1950s marked by intense anti-communist hysteria in the United States, named after Senator Joseph McCarthy. It involves aggressive investigations and accusations against alleged communists and subversives in government, entertainment, and other sections. Many people were blacklisted from their jobs, they lost their jobs, or faced legal consequences based on minimal or fabricated evidence. It was fueled by Cold War tensions and the fear of Soviet influence, leading to violations of civil liberties and a climate of suspicion, ultimately discredited by the late 1950s as reckless and unjust. These names were changed in the play. John Scopes becomes Bertrand Cates, Clarence Darrow became Henry Drummond, and William Jennings Bryan became Matthew Harrison Brady, and H.L. Mencken became E.K. Hornbeck. The play amplifies the courtroom drama, of course, to make it more fun to watch, making Darrow, Drummond, a heroic figure while Bryan, Brady, more rigid and flawed than he actually was in real life. While the core themes of science versus religion and freedom of thought remain, the play emphasizes the philosophical debate rather than the historical details. Inherit the Wind has shaped public understanding of the Scopes trial, often making people see it more as a symbolic struggle than the complex historical event it was. The 1960s film adaptation, starring Spencer Tracy and Frederick March, reinforced this version, popularizing the trial as a dramatic clash between progress and tradition. The Scopes monkey trial was more than just a legal case. It was a turning point in America's cultural landscape. It represented a clash of ideas and sparked conversations that continue today about what is taught in schools, the separation of church and state, and the right to freedom of thought. And it didn't really work out that well for Dayton. They thought it would help bring people to their community for business reasons. I don't think that really helped them. It ended up kind of making them look bad in a way, or at least that's what the townspeople became afraid of. The Scopes trial wasn't just a battle over science, it was a battle over America's identity. As debates over education and civil liberties continued, the lessons of Dayton, Tennessee in 1925 still resonate. We're still debating today. what we should be teaching in public schools, or more importantly, what we shouldn't be teaching in public schools. And I don't think that's going to go anywhere anytime soon. And as I said, one of the books I read was called Trial of the Century. It is about the Scopes trial, and it has a lot of good photos, because there were photos taken at this time. They are in black and white, and you can see where they are outside at one point, because they just could not hold all the people that were interested. Plus, of course, this was before air conditioning, and it was summertime, and it was very hot. So they went outside. Probably didn't help Brady with his eventual death 5 days later. And that is true. In the play, of course, he dies right after the verdict, but that's for dramatic reasons, artistic license. That's all for this episode of Time Tellers. If you enjoyed learning about the Scopes monkey trial, let us know of any other historical trials you would like us to talk about. I will probably do the Leopold and Loeb trial. Okay, don't forget to leave us a review and let us know if we made any mistakes, because I probably did, even though this is one I know pretty well. But it's been a long week, and I apologize. There was a monkey. They did bring in a monkey for this. There's a reason why, besides evolution itself, but they did have a monkey, outside, not into the trial, but, it was part of, the craziness that was happening in town. And on stage, there's a monkey, although we did not have a real one.
Why?
Because nobody had a monkey. The last time the Playhouse did inherit the wind, which I don't remember what year, one of the actors had a capuchin monkey, and they did bring him on stage. But we did not have that.
They can borrow one from the zoo?
No, we did not borrow one from the zoo. So join us next time as we explore another fascinating chapter in our country's history. This is a chapter that we can hopefully learn from and not forget. And there are many more to come. Okay. Cut.
Oh, I'm hitting cut?
I don't know.
Okay.